This is the Holy Land Timeline, bringing the Bible to life from the Holy Land.
Walking the ground where history meets faith. You're listening to the Holy Land Path on the Holy Land Timeline. Here are your hosts, Ethan and Sarah. Welcome to the Holy Land Path. Shalom from the heart of ancient history.
It is so great to be here with you as we dive into another incredible journey.
It really is. And, today we are taking you on a deep dive into something that literally started with a completely mundane modern-day headache.
A broken sewage pipe.
Exactly. I mean, picture it. It's the fall of 2004. You're in Siloam, which is this incredibly steep, densely packed neighborhood just south of the old city walls in Jerusalem. And there's a leak.
Right. Just a totally standard municipal problem.
Yeah, so the utility workers bring in a backhoe. They just want to dig up the street, patch the pipe, and go home. But because it's Jerusalem, you can't just dig a hole without an archaeologist watching your every move.
Which is such a unique reality of living there. You have archaeologists from the Israel Antiquities Authority, specifically Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukran in this case, just standing by, watching the mud get scraped away.
And then the backhoe operator is digging, and suddenly there's this sound. Just this deep, heavy, grinding scrape against something huge.
And in Jerusalem, that sound means you stop the machine immediately.
Immediately. So the archaeologists climb down into the muck, they start clearing away the wet earth by hand, and they realize this isn't bedrock. This is a perfectly hewn, a massive, blindingly white limestone step.
And then they clear a little more, they find another step, and another one.
It's just wild. They were looking for a busted sewer line, and they accidentally stumbled onto the very paving stones that were walked on by millions of ancient Jewish pilgrims, and, highly, highly likely, Jesus of Nazareth himself.
Is the ultimate example of this serendipity that defines biblical archaeology. You have this frustrating infrastructural failure that just peels back the veil on one of the most monumental archaeological revelations in recent memory.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So for you listening today, we have compiled a massive stack of sources to unpack exactly what they found under that mud. We are pulling from the official Antiquities Authority, archaeological reports, historical archives, some really detailed geopolitical analyses, and on-the-ground engineering guides.
It's a lot of material to cover.
It is, yeah. But our mission for this deep dive is to essentially walk step by step up this 2,000-year-old step street, the recently inaugurated pilgrimage road in the city of David. We want to explore its profound biblical significance, the breathtaking engineering that went into uncovering it, and, the intense modern geopolitical debates it sparked.
And before we get into the physical dimensions or the specific artifacts, it's crucial to establish why this matters so deeply to you, the listener.
Right.
Because we so often interact with ancient history, and especially biblical narratives, as these abstract concepts. We read words on a page, and those words sort of float in this ethereal realm of theology or ancient mythology.
Yeah, they don't always feel grounded in the dirt.
Exactly. But a discovery like the Pilgrimage Road, it changes the fundamental nature of that interaction. This isn't abstract anymore. This is a tangible, physical, highly verifiable link to the ancient world. It takes the text and transforms it into a walkable reality.
You are literally looking at the exact stones that define the epicenter of the Judeo-Christian world. It anchors the whole narrative in objective geology.
Theology and architecture, yeah.
But to truly understand the sheer magnitude of what this road was, we really have to grasp its physical footprint. Let's look at the scale of this construction project, because looking at the reports, it is just staggering.
Oh, it's massive. We're talking about a road that is 600 meters long, so roughly a third of a mile. And it's a sprawling 8 meters, or about 26 feet wide.
Connecting the Pool of Siloam at the very lowest point of the city, all the way up the Tyropoeon Valley, right up to the foot of the Temple Mount.
And that geographical detail is key. The fact that it starts at the bottom of a valley and goes to the peak of Mount Moriah means this entire 600-meter stretch is uphill.
All uphill. Which brings me to the logistics of it. The sources indicate that archaeologists calculated over 10,000 tons of limestone were used to pave this road.
10,000 tons.
Yeah, which is just an abstract number to most people. But if you want to understand the mechanics of that, think about the steel required for a modern mid-sized skyscraper. Now imagine quarrying that equivalent weight out of solid bedrock using nothing that, Iron wedges, water, and human muscle.
And then moving it across uneven terrain without combustion engines.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And they actually traced the specific type of limestone used for these massive paving stones back to the Har Hatzfim area, which sits in the northern part of modern Jerusalem.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, this was a massive ancient quarrying site. It was known for producing this high-quality, hard limestone that's often referred to locally as melek, or royal stone.
Royal stone, right, because it polishes up so brilliantly white.
Exactly. It can be cut incredibly cleanly. But the mechanics of getting 10,000 tons of that melek stone from Har Hatzfim all the way down to the city of David, I mean, they would have had to use massive wooden sleds, teams of oxen, and just an absolute army of laborers.
Carefully navigating the steep, treacherous topography of first-century Jerusalem. It is a staggering feat of civic engineering, which actually leads me to a major question I had when I was going through these reports.
Okay, what's that?
Well, for decades, basically every tour guide, every historian assumed that Herod the Great built this street.
Oh, sure. He was the master builder.
Right. He expanded the Temple Mount, he built the palaces, Masada. It seemed obvious that this was his project. But the recent IAA reports totally upend that. They are definitively dating the completion of this road to around 30 to 31 CE. How can they be so absolutely sure it wasn't Herod?
That is where the meticulous science of numismatics comes in.
The study of coins.
Right, the study of coins becomes the ultimate arbiter of history here. When archaeologists are excavating a site like this, they aren't just looking at the stones themselves, they're looking at what is sealed beneath the stones.
Because anything on top could be from any time.
Exactly. If you find a coin sitting on top of the pilgrimage road, it only tells you who walked on the road after it was already built. But to lay these massive limestone pavers, the ancient builders first had to lay down a bedding of dirt, ash, and mortar to level out the ground.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Right, so while they were working, laborers dropped things. Coins fell out of pouches, and they were permanently sealed in the mortar beneath thousands of pounds of rock when the pavers were drummed into place.
So the stones act like this massive geological time capsule. There's absolutely no way a coin from a later date could slip underneath a perfectly sealed, multi-ton block of limestone.
Precisely. It provides what archaeologists call a terminus postquem, the earliest possible date the street could have been completed. And beneath the pilgrimage road, they found dozens of coins minted by the Roman prefect Valerius Gratus.
Okay.
And crucially, coins minted by his successor, Pontius Pilate. The absolute latest coins they found sealed under the street date to roughly 30 to 31 CE.
And Herod the Great died in 4 BCE.
Right. So the stratigraphy and the numismatics prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this massive infrastructure project was not Herod's doing. It was commissioned and completed during the tenure of Pontius Pilate.
Which is just a brilliant historical irony, right? The man most famous for ordering the crucifixion of Jesus was also the civic administrator responsible for building the grand thoroughfare that allowed millions of Jewish pilgrims, including Jesus himself, to ascend to the temple.
It really is an incredible irony.
But I want to focus on the architecture of the ascent itself, because the physical layout of these 10,000 tons of stone is fascinating. It wasn't just, a smooth, inclined ramp designed to get you up the hill as fast as possible.
No, not at all.
The engineers designed it with a very specific repeating pattern. It's alternating wide steps and long landings. You'd have 2 steps, then a long flat stretch, then 2 steps, then another long flat stretch.
It's a brilliant piece of architectural psychology, because if you have a massive flat ramp, human nature dictates that people will just rush. They'll hurry to get to the top.
Yeah, especially in a huge crowd.
Right. But when you are dealing with a religious pilgrimage, the journey itself is supposed to be part of the spiritual preparation. So by utilizing this specific alternating pattern, the architecture physically dictates your rhythm.
You literally cannot sprint up the pilgrimage road.
No. If you try, you will stumble. The stones force you to adopt this slow, measured, dignified pace.
I love that. It's almost like crowd control masquerading as spiritual architecture. It reminds me of when you walk into a grand cathedral or a massive modern memorial site. The sheer scale and the layout of the space dictate your reverence. You don't sprint through the doors of a massive basilica.
You can't. The space physically prevents you from rushing into the presence of the divine. You have to slow down. You have to look up.
And as these ancient pilgrims looked up, moving at this measured pace, they were preparing their hearts. The forced rhythm of the steps likely synchronized with the singing of the Psalms of Ascent.
The Psalms of Ascent, yes, Psalms 120 through 134.
I rejoiced with those who said to me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord."
Exactly. I mean, just imagine the acoustics of the Tyropean Valley. You have tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people on this street at any given time during the festivals.
Oh, the sound must have been deafening.
Their footsteps synchronized by the stone, their voices rising together in these ancient chants as the gleaming gold and white marble of the Temple Mount slowly crested the horizon. The architecture engineered a collective spiritual experience.
It is a breathtaking image, but I do have to push back a little on the idea that this was purely a solemn, monastic march up the hill.
Okay, fair enough.
Because looking at the artifact reports from the excavations along the sides of the road, this wasn't just a quiet religious pathway. It was a chaotic, vibrant, incredibly noisy marketplace.
Oh, without question. In the ancient world, piety and commerce were never really segregated. The pilgrimage road was the central artery of the city. And the archaeology has uncovered the rich, quotidian reality, the daily, bustling life of first-century Jerusalem.
They found the remains of storefronts lining both sides of this 26-foot-wide highway. And inside those storefronts, they found the literal tools of the trade. For example, the ancient stone weights used by merchants to measure grain, spices, precious metals.
Which ties directly back to biblical law, by the way.
Ah.
The Torah strictly mandates honest weights and measures. Finding these standardized stone weights, many carved with specific markings to denote their exact mass, it shows a highly regulated, thriving market economy operating right alongside the spiritual ascent.
And the money flowing through this economy was deeply international. The sources note that the sheer variety of coins excavated from the storefronts and the street level is astonishing.
It's like a cross-section of the ancient world.
Yeah. They found coins from Carthage in North Africa, from Alexandria in Egypt, from Greece, from across the Persian Empire. It physically proves that this road was a cosmopolitan hub. It was the ultimate gathering place for the Jewish diaspora.
But there's a specific nuance here regarding the currency that I find fascinating. Because while Roman denarii and local provincial coins were used for buying, everyday items like a new cloak or food, when it came to the temple tax, that half shekel required of every Jewish male, only one specific currency was accepted.
Right, the Tyrian shekel.
The Tyrian shekel. And it is a wonderful historical paradox. These coins were minted in the city of Tyre, in modern-day Lebanon. And on the front of the coin was the image of Melkart, the Phoenician equivalent of the god Baal.
Wait, really? A pagan god?
Yes. And on the back was an eagle and a Greek inscription. From a strict biblical perspective, this coin is a blatant violation of the commandment against graven images, and it bears the face of a pagan deity.
So why on earth would the priests at the Holy Temple demand that specific coin for the holy tax?
Because of the metallurgy. The Tyrian shekels were renowned across the entire ancient world for having the highest, most consistent silver purity, usually around 94% or higher.
Ah, so the money mattered more than the image.
Well, the priests determined that the purity of the silver for the treasury superseded the offensive imagery on the coin. So pilgrims arriving with Roman or Alexandrian coins would have to exchange their foreign currency for Tyrian shekels just to pay their tax.
Which perfectly explains why Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers. I mean, they were sitting in the temple precincts exchanging these international coins for Tyrian shekels, likely charging exorbitant exchange rates to these weary travelers.
Exactly. The pilgrimage road would have been packed with these merchants and money changers leading all the way up to the mount.
And the goods being traded weren't just basic survival staples either. The excavations completely shattered a long-held archaeological assumption. Because for decades, historians believed that the lower city, the southern slope of the city of David, where this road runs, was basically the slum district.
Right, the poor area of town where the working class lived in squalor.
Exactly, but the artifacts have proven the exact opposite. Alongside the common pottery, archaeologists unearthed incredible luxury items. They found delicate, completely intact glass perfume bottles, intricate jewelry.
But perhaps the most telling artifacts are the fragments of these beautifully carved, inlaid stone tables.
The Herodian-style geometric stone tables, right?
Yes, those exact ones. And the reason stone was so popular among the wealthy elite of Jerusalem wasn't just aesthetic, it was actually religious.
How so?
Well, according to the strict interpretations of Jewish purity laws at the time, stone vessels cannot contract ritual impurity.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, if a ceramic bowl becomes impure, you have to smash it. It's ruined. But if a stone bowl becomes impure, you can purify it. So the presence of these heavy, expensive, ritually pure stone tables Alongside imported perfumes and international currency, it fundamentally rewrites our understanding of the lower city.
It wasn't a slum at all.
Not at all. This was a wealthy, dynamic, highly desirable commercial district.
So, if we synthesize all of this, the sensory experience of walking the pilgrimage road is almost overwhelming to imagine. You have the smell of exotic, imported, balsam perfumes mingling with roasting meats and incense. You have the sharp clinking of highly pure Tyrian silver being counted on stone tables.
Shouts of merchants speaking Greek, Aramaic, Latin.
Layered right beneath the rhythmic, booming chorus of hundreds of thousands of pilgrims singing the Psalms of Ascent. All of this is happening simultaneously on this gleaming white limestone highway.
A highway that had one ultimate destination and one absolute prerequisite for entry. Which brings us to the profound spiritual mechanics of the road itself.
Yes, let's look at the purification process, because you didn't just, hop off your donkey after a 2-week journey from Alexandria and waltz up to the Temple Mount.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The entire structure of the biblical pilgrimage festivals, Passover, Shavuot, or Pentecost, and Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, it was all predicated on ritual purity. And the ancient historian Josephus, along with later demographic estimates, suggests that during these festivals, the population of Jerusalem would swell to just unimaginable numbers. Some estimates suggest up to 2.5 million pilgrims.
See, I always struggle with that number, 2.5 million people. The footprint of walled ancient Jerusalem wasn't that massive. How do you physically fit that many human beings into the city? Where did they sleep?
Well, they didn't all sleep inside the walls. The city itself would have been packed shoulder to shoulder, sure. But the surrounding landscape, the Mount of Olives, the Kidron Valley, the hillsides stretching toward Bethlehem and Bethany, that whole area would have been transformed into massive, sprawling tent cities.
Just a sea of tents.
A sea of tents. The smoke from hundreds of thousands of campfires would have blanketed the entire region. But regardless of where they slept, before a single one of those 2.5 million people could set foot on the Temple Mount to offer their sacrifice, they had to undergo ritual immersion.
They had to achieve tahara, ritual purity.
Yes, they had to achieve tahara.
And that is exactly why the pilgrimage road begins exactly where it does, at the Pool of Siloam.
Because the Pool of Siloam wasn't just a reservoir for drinking water, it was the largest mikvah or ritual bath in the entire city. But the hydrological engineering required to operate a mikvah of that scale is staggering.
Because it can't just be any water.
Right. According to Jewish law, a mikveh cannot just be filled with drawn water carried in buckets. It must contain maim, living water, meaning it must be connected to a natural spring or a flowing river.
Which in Jerusalem, a city perched on the edge of a desert, is a massive problem. The city only has one natural year-round water source, which is the Gihon Spring.
Exactly. And the Gihon Spring is located outside the original defensive walls, deep in the Kidron Valley. But centuries earlier, King Hezekiah had engineered a massive winding tunnel carved through solid bedrock to channel the waters of the Gihon Spring into the city to protect the water supply from an Assyrian siege.
Right, Hezekiah's tunnel.
Yes, and the waters from Hezekiah's tunnel flowed directly into the Pool of Siloam. So this continuous flowing connection to the Gihon Spring provided the living water status required for a mikveh.
That is brilliant.
But managing the human traffic of millions of people needing to immerse themselves in this pool required extreme architectural discipline.
Right, because if you are ritually pure after bathing and you accidentally brush shoulders with someone walking down into the pool who is still impure, you immediately contract their impurity and have to start all over again.
Exactly.
The logistics of preventing that with 2.5 million people sound like an absolute nightmare.
Which is why the steps leading down into the Pool of Siloam and the steps on the pilgrimage road itself were often partitioned. Ancient sources and archaeological remains of other large mikvahs show low dividing walls on the staircases.
Oh, so it's like a one-way street.
Yes. You walk down the right side while impure, immersed in the living water, and walk up the left side while pure, ensuring absolutely no physical contact between the two groups.
It was a massive, highly regulated spiritual machine. And the Pool of Siloam played an even more active, spectacular role during the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. The sources describe the water libation ceremony, and the mechanics of this ritual are just incredible.
It was the absolute climax of the festival. For 7 days, the priest would perform this deeply joyous ritual. A priest, accompanied by a massive entourage and musicians, would walk down the pilgrimage road from the temple to the Pool of Siloam.
And he carried a specific golden flask, right?
He did. He would dip this golden vessel into the living waters of Siloam, and then the procession would turn around and ascend the road.
With the crowds waving palm branches and willow branches, chanting the Hallel Psalms.
And as the priests reached the water gate of the temple, the Levites would sound these long, blasting calls on the shofar, the ram's horn. The priest would then carry the golden flask to the great altar and pour the water over the altar as a libation. It was a physical prayer for winter rains and a symbolic outpouring of the Holy Spirit.
The Talmud explicitly states that the joy in the city during the ceremony was so overwhelming that he who has not seen the rejoicing at the water drawing has never seen rejoicing in his life.
It was unparalleled joy.
And it is exactly in this context, this specific physical location of the Pool of Siloam and this specific road, that we find one of the most vivid narratives in the New Testament. For our Christian listeners, the Gospel of John, chapter 9, plays out right here on these stones.
Yes, the healing of the blind man.
Right. Jesus encounters a man who had been blind from birth. And rather than just speaking a word of healing, Jesus engages in a very tactile physical process. He spits on the ground, makes mud with the saliva, smears the mud on the blind man's eyes, and issues a specific command: go wash in the Pool of Siloam.
The geography of that command is crucial to understand. Jesus and his disciples were likely up near the Temple Mount area when this encounter happened.
So to get to the pool.
To get to the Pool of Siloam, this blind man, with his eyes covered in wet mud, had to navigate his way down the entire 600-meter length of the bustling, chaotic, uneven-stepped pilgrimage road.
He had to walk down the right side of the partition steps, trusting the architecture to guide him to the bottom.
And when he finally reached the bottom, he immersed himself in the living waters of the mikvah. The text says he washed and came home seeing. And think about it. Once his sight was restored, the very first thing he would have seen looking back up the hill was the magnificent pilgrimage road stretching upward toward the temple.
Wow.
He would have then walked back up those exact steps, now as a seeing, ritually pure man.
And it's not just the blind man. The reality of historical record is that Jesus himself walked this road multiple times.
Absolutely. We have to separate theology from historical obligation for a moment. Jesus of Nazareth was a practicing, devout, Torah-observant Jew of the first century.
Right.
And the law of Aliyah L'Regel, the commandment to ascend to Jerusalem for the 3 pilgrimage festivals, was non-negotiable for a devout man of his standing.
So he was there.
Therefore, when archaeologists, historians, and secular scholars look at the pilgrimage road, they state with absolute conservative confidence: there is a 100% chance that Jesus walked these exact stones. He would have descended the Siloam pool, immersed himself, and walked up this 26-foot-wide limestone street alongside his disciples, teaching and debating as they ascended.
Just pause and let the gravity of that sink in. You are not looking at a replica. You are not looking at a site somewhere in the vicinity of the biblical events. You are looking at the actual, unreconstructed, original stones that Jesus of Nazareth stepped on. It bridges the gap between faith and empirical reality.
It's deeply profound.
But what completely blew my mind in these IAA reports is that the history of this narrow ridge, this tiny slice of real estate we call the City of David, goes back so much further than the Roman period. We're talking centuries earlier. First Temple echoes.
The layering of history here is what makes the stratigraphy of Jerusalem arguably the most complex in the world. As the teams were excavating the areas immediately adjacent to and beneath the Roman-era road, they hit destruction layers from the Babylonian conquest in 586 BCE.
The Babylonian conquest.
Yeah, and in those layers, they found artifacts from the era of the biblical kings.
The bulla. This is one of my favorite archaeological mechanics. For those who don't know, a bulla is a tiny lump of clay used to seal a papyrus document. You tie a string around the scroll, press a lump of wet clay over the knot, and stamp it with your personal signet ring.
Exactly.
Now, normally, unfired clay just dissolves in damp soil over thousands of years, but how did these survive?
Because of the tragedy of destruction. When the Babylonians breached the walls of Jerusalem and set the city on fire, the royal archives burned. The papyrus scrolls were incinerated into ash, but the intense heat of the inferno actually acted like a kiln.
It baked the clay.
It baked the wet clay bullae, turning them into hardened ceramic, permanently preserving the names stamped upon them.
And the names they found are staggering. They sifted through the ash and found a bulla bearing the name Gemariahu ben Shaphan. If you crack open the book of Jeremiah, chapter 36, Gemariahu the son of Shaphan is specifically named as a high-ranking scribe and official in the royal court of King Jehoiakim.
And they found his actual physical seal in the dirt.
They also found another seal bearing the name Natan-Melech, who is explicitly described in the Book of 2 Kings as a servant of the king, dating back to the late 7th century BCE.
It forces us to fundamentally change how we view time in this space. This single ridge of land, just a few acres wide, contains an unbroken, verifiable vertical column of human civilization. You have the bedrock of the Canaanites, the united monarchy of David and Solomon, the divided monarchy, the Babylonian destruction, the return from exile, and the grand infrastructure of the Second Temple period, all stacked directly on top of one another.
Take a moment to let these discoveries sink in as we listen to a melody of the land. Welcome back to the Holy Land Path.
It is good to be back.
So, before the break, we were standing in the brilliant sunlight of the 1st century, ascending this glorious, bustling, wealthy street, surrounded by millions of pilgrims heading toward the majestic Temple Mount. But now, we have to extinguish the sunlight.
We do.
We must look directly beneath the heavy limestone paving stones, because the story of the Pilgrimage Road did not end in glory. It ended in unspeakable tragedy in the year 70 CE.
It really is a tale of two cities, literally operating simultaneously. To understand the apocalyptic end of Jerusalem, you have to look at the engineering of the Herodian drainage channel that runs directly beneath the street.
The ancient sewer system?
Yes, but the term sewer doesn't quite capture the architectural grandeur of it. Because the pilgrimage road sat in the trough of the Tyropean Valley, all the rainwater runoff from the entire city flowed down toward it.
Right, gravity.
So to prevent the street from flooding, engineers built a massive vaulted tunnel directly beneath the pavers. It was constructed with huge ashlar blocks, creating a subterranean corridor large enough in many places for a person to stand upright. It was designed to carry the water and waste down into the Kidron Valley.
But in the summer of 70 CE, during the climax of the Great Jewish Revolt against Rome, the function of this tunnel violently shifted.
The Roman legions, commanded by Titus, breached the northern walls of the city. The siege had been starving the population for months. The Romans pushed through the streets, slaughtering everyone in their path, and eventually set the temple itself on fire.
And as the city burned, the drainage tunnel ceased being a civic utility. It became a desperate, terrifying, claustrophobic hiding place. The Jewish historian Josephus, who was present during the siege, wrote extensively about this exact channel.
He did.
He described how the rebel fighters and the starving citizens of Jerusalem, with the city utterly engulfed in flames above them, used iron tools to pry up the massive paving stones of the pilgrimage road and slip down into the darkness of the sewers to escape the Roman swords.
And, for centuries, modern historians read Josephus's accounts of the siege and thought, well, he's prone to exaggeration. He's adding dramatic flair. Surely thousands of people weren't living in the sewers.
Right.
But when the archaeologists cleared the 2,000-year-old debris from this specific drainage channel beneath the road, the artifacts they found perfectly, chillingly validated Josephus's darkest accounts. The mechanics of what they found down there paint a picture of sheer terror.
We aren't just talking about broken pottery washed down by the rain. They found intact cooking pots sitting on the floor of the tunnel.
And through organic residue analysis and the presence of soot, archaeologists determined these pots actually contained the charred remains of half-eaten meals.
Imagine the psychological horror of that moment. You have families, children, and rebel fighters huddling in the pitch black, standing in the damp muck of a sewer. They are starving. They have somehow managed to scrounge enough food to light a small fire and cook a meal.
And as they are trying to eat in silence, they can hear the heavy, hobnailed boots of Roman legionnaires echoing on the limestone pavers just a few feet above their heads.
They hear the screams, they hear the city collapsing, and they had to abandon that precious half-eaten meal in a sudden panic.
And the artifacts of the Romans themselves were also found down there. Archaeologists uncovered a Roman legionnaire's sword, a gladius or spatha, still locked inside its leather and wood scabbard.
Which raises an incredible forensic question. How does a sheathed Roman sword end up in a Jewish hiding place? Did a Roman soldier pry up a stone, drop down into the dark to hunt the rebels, and get ambushed, losing his weapon?
Or did a rebel fighter manage to kill a Roman on the street above, steal his sword, and take it down into the tunnel as a desperate measure of defense, only to die before he could even unsheath it?
We'll never know.
We find the weapons of the siege as well. Massive stone catapult balls, ballista stones, carved from hard rock, were found smashed into the paving stones and fallen into the channel. These were the artillery rounds the Romans used to shatter the walls and crush the defensive positions.
But amidst all the weapons and the cooking pots, the sources highlight one artifact that is perhaps the most poignant, heartbreaking discovery of the entire excavation. It is just a tiny, seemingly insignificant piece of broken pottery, a potsherd.
Just a fragment.
But on this piece of fired clay, an anonymous person took a sharp rock or a nail and scratched a drawing.
They scratched an image of the temple menorah, the seven-branched candelabra.
The mechanics of this are so intimate. Someone was sitting in total darkness, they were likely going to die, but they took the time to meticulously carve this image.
And the specific proportions of the carving indicate it was drawn by someone who had clearly seen the real, solid gold menorah standing in the holy place of the temple before the Romans looted it and carried it away.
They were hiding in the literal ashes of their civilization, in the bowels of the earth, and they chose to scratch the ultimate symbol of their faith and divine light into a piece of garbage. It is an artifact of ultimate despair, but also of profound, defiant memory.
It breaks your heart to think about the person holding that shard.
It really does. But there was another discovery in that drainage channel that completely defies expectation. Reading the IAA reports, I had to stop and reread this section because it sounds like fiction. Deep in the muck of the sewer, archaeologists sifted out a tiny, perfectly preserved, pure gold bell with a small loop affixed to the top.
Ah, yes. The golden bell. The presence of this object in a sewer is a staggering juxtaposition. To understand why, we have to look at the mechanics of the high priest's garments, as outlined in the biblical book of Exodus, chapter 39. The text provides highly specific, non-negotiable instructions for the vestments the high priest must wear when entering the holy place. The hem of his blue robe, the meal, was to be decorated with alternating ornaments. The scripture dictates a golden bell and a pomegranate, a golden bell and a pomegranate, all around the hem of the robe.
So the high priest's garments were acoustically engineered. He would literally chime as he walked.
Yes, the acoustic function was vital. The Bible states the sound of the bells must be heard when he enters the holy place before the Lord and when he comes out, so that he will not die. It was an auditory signal to the crowds outside and symbolically to the divine of his ministering presence.
And here, centuries later, buried in the filth of a drainage ditch beneath the pilgrimage road, archaeologists pull out a golden bell that perfectly, precisely matches that ancient biblical description. It even has the loop where it would have been sewn onto the fabric of the hem.
Which leaves us with a haunting, unanswered forensic mystery. How does an object of the highest, purest, most exclusive sanctity in the Jewish world end up in the lowest, darkest sewer?
Yeah, how does that happen? Did the bell simply tear off the high priest's robe as he was walking down the pilgrimage road to the Pool of Siloam years before the war, and it just slipped through the cracks in the heavy paving stones and washed away?
Or, and this is a chilling thought, did a high priest, or perhaps a loyal priest who had grabbed the sacred garments from the temple treasury as the fires raged, try to hide in the sewers during the apocalyptic Roman siege in 70 CE?
To save them from the Romans.
Exactly. Did they carry the vestments into the dark and the bell snapped off in the chaos? We will likely never know the exact mechanism of how it got there. But as a symbol, it perfectly encapsulates the tragedy of Jerusalem's fall, the highest sanctity of the temple buried in the lowest place of refuge.
The narrative of the pilgrimage road effectively ends there in 70 CE. The Romans destroyed the city, the debris filled the valley, and for nearly 2 millennia, the great limestone highway sat buried in complete darkness.
Which brings us to today.
Yes, it does. The story of its unearthing is an unprecedented modern marvel, but we must acknowledge that it sits at the absolute epicenter of the most volatile geopolitical fault line on the planet, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We have to address the modern excavation and the intense debates running right through this dirt.
It is entirely impossible to separate the science of archaeology in Jerusalem from the modern political reality above ground. But before we get to the politics, we have to understand the sheer engineering mechanics of how this was uncovered.
Because this was not a traditional archaeological dig.
No, you couldn't just rope off an empty field, bring in bulldozers, and dig straight down from the sky.
Right, because there is a modern, densely populated neighborhood built directly on top of the ancient ruins.
Exactly. The Arab neighborhood of Siloam sits atop the ancient city of David Ridge. If the archaeologists dug straight down from the surface, they would destroy dozens of modern homes. So the engineers had to design a way to tunnel horizontally.
Starting from the Pool of Siloam and moving upward.
Right. Tracing the 2,000-year-old street underground while simultaneously supporting the sheer weight of the earth and the modern concrete houses hovering just feet above their heads.
I mean, how is that even structurally possible without causing a massive sinkhole?
They utilized a highly complex engineering technique called the subhorizontal pipe roofing method. Basically, before they removed any dirt from the tunnel face, they would use hydraulic rams to drive massive steel pipes horizontally into the earth ahead of them.
Okay.
They would then inject concrete into these pipes, creating a reinforced steel and concrete umbrella over their heads. Only after the umbrella was secured would they dig out the dupe beneath it.
That's incredibly meticulous.
And it's also installed hundreds of fiber optic sensors on the foundations of the modern homes above ground. These sensors were monitored 24/7 and could detect a shift in the earth of even a single millimeter. If the earth moved, the digging stopped instantly. The mechanics were so innovative and meticulously executed that Israel actually won a highly prestigious international tunneling award for safely excavating beneath a populated urban area without causing a surface collapse.
But as we know, uncovering history in Jerusalem is never just about winning structural engineering awards. It is highly, intensely political. The dirt itself is a proxy for sovereignty. How does archaeology shift from being a scientific endeavor into a tool for soft diplomacy, or, depending on who you ask, a weapon?
That is the critical question of modern Jerusalem. And to understand it, we must look objectively at the two dominant, fiercely conflicting perspectives surrounding this specific excavation site.
Let's start with the Israeli side.
Right. On one side, we have the Israeli and settler perspective. This massive excavation project is heavily funded and managed by the Elad Foundation, a right-leaning NGO that operates the City of David National Park. For Elad and for many Israelis, uncovering the pilgrimage road is not just about historical curiosity, it is about unearthing the literal title deed to the land.
They view these limestone pavers and these ancient coins as undeniable, physical, empirical proof of Jewish indigeneity and an unbroken Judeo-Christian heritage spanning thousands of years in this specific valley.
Precisely. And this perspective was heavily validated by international political figures. At the official inauguration ceremony of the Underground Road, prominent U.S. politicians, including Ambassador David Friedman and Senator Marco Rubio, were in attendance.
Senator Rubio even symbolically took a sledgehammer to a ceremonial wall in the tunnel to officially open it, right?
It did. For the supporters of the project, this signaled a massive diplomatic victory and international recognition of Jewish historical rights to the Holy Basin.
However, we must look at the reality above ground as well. On the other side of this fault line is the Palestinian and NGO perspective. As we detailed, the City of David Park sits beneath and adjacent to the arid neighborhood of Silwan, specifically an area known as Wadi Hilweh.
Yes. And the Palestinian residents of Silwan, supported by left-wing Israeli archaeological NGOs like mikvahs, argue that these excavations are not objective science, but a highly orchestrated settler colonial project.
Their central argument is that the tunneling is designed to Judaize the area,
meaning the excavations focus exclusively or disproportionately on the First and Second Temple Jewish periods, while intentionally erasing, ignoring, or minimizing the centuries of Palestinian, Islamic, and Byzantine heritage that also exist in the stratigraphy.
Furthermore, despite the International Engineering Awards, mikvahs and local residents argue that the sub-horizontal tunneling is fundamentally unsafe and actively endangers the structural integrity of their homes above ground. They view the archaeology as being weaponized as a tool to undermine their foundations and eventually force them out of the neighborhood. I want to make something very clear to you, our listener. Here at the Holy Land Path, we do not take a side in this modern geopolitical struggle. Our explicit mission is to convey the realities of the source material we are examining. And the legal and social reality of this dig is incredibly complex. For instance, the claims regarding structural damage and the legality of the digging were taken all the way to the Supreme Court of Israel.
Yes. Justice Edna Arbel comprehensively reviewed the petitions filed by the residents and the NGOs to halt the excavations.
And what was the outcome?
The court's ruling was definitive. After reviewing testimonies from independent engineers and safety inspectors, the Supreme Court ruled that the excavations were entirely safe, structurally sound, and performed under the strictest professional engineering standards globally available. The petitions to stop the dig were dismissed.
Yet, despite that definitive legal and engineering validation from the highest court, the emotional, social, and political stakes for the people living in Silwan remain incredibly volatile.
They absolutely do.
The sources note a profound human tragedy woven into the economics of the dig. For years, many of the laborers actually doing the back-breaking work of excavating the pilgrimage road were Palestinian residents of Silwan. They were earning a vital living digging beneath their own village.
But as the geopolitical tension escalated, these workers faced severe, credible threats of violence and intimidation from Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, who viewed their labor as collaborating with the Judaization of Jerusalem.
The threats became so severe that many were forced to abandon their well-paying jobs out of fear for their families' lives.
It is a stark reminder that archaeology in Jerusalem is not a dead science. It is a very real, very active battleground of memory, identity, and sovereignty today. Every single stone pulled from the earth is immediately conscripted into a modern political narrative.
It is the heavy burden of Jerusalem. The dirt holds both objective scientific truth and highly subjective political power. So after walking through the monumental architecture, the profound spiritual rituals, the horrifying destruction, and the modern political battles, what does this all mean? How do we synthesize this massive wealth of information?
That's the big question.
As we conclude this journey, we want to look at a core spiritual theme, a lesson that rises above the politics and the ancient mud. And the theme that screams out from these limestone stones is the concept of continuity.
I think continuity is the exact right framework. If we connect the micro details of what we've discussed to the massive macro picture of history, the pilgrimage road is the ultimate tactile testament to the continuity of faith.
Think about the contrast we explored. We stood in the Herodian drainage channel. We looked at the charred cooking pots, the discarded Roman sword, and the menorah scratched in the dark.
We saw the apex of the Roman Empire's military might, trying to completely, utterly erase this culture and this faith in 70 CE. But look at the grand sweep of history. Where is the Roman Empire today?
Gone.
The Caesars are dust. The empire fell. Yet 2,000 years later, the stones of the pilgrimage road have emerged from the darkness pristine and intact.
They survived the fire.
They did. And more importantly, what they represent survived. It reminds us that while massive empires rise, exert their brutal will, and inevitably fall, the physical foundations of the biblical narratives endure.
That deep spiritual yearning of those millions of ancient pilgrims to go up to the house of the Lord, that internal faithful desire has survived intact across 2 millennia of exile and destruction.
The road was buried, but the path of faith never was. And today, the physical road has been resurrected, and people are walking it once again.
It is a profoundly moving realization. It bridges the ancient and the modern in a way very few places on Earth can. Which brings me back to the mechanics of the things we physically build with our lives. I want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over today as you go about your week.
I love these.
We marvel at these 10,000 tons of limestone. We marvel at the sheer effort the ancients expended to build a road specifically designed to lead them to the divine. So ask yourself, when future archaeologists dig up the ruins of our modern cities 2,000 years from now, what pilgrimage roads will they find in our stratigraphy?
What a question.
What paths are we building today with our time, our energy, our money, and our architecture that will show those future generations what we truly worshipped? Are we building paths to the divine or paths to ourselves?
A deeply profound question. We all leave a layer in the dirt, just as they did. It is up to us to decide what that layer looks like.
If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe and follow the Holy Land Path on this platform so you never miss a discovery.
Until next time, keep walking the ancient paths. God bless you.
The world is loud, but the morning is still. As the sun starts to climb o'er the crest of the hill, I used to worry about the miles up ahead, about the mountains of doubt and the words that were said. But I'm learning to lean on a promise so true that carries me through when I don't know what to do. 'Cause I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He's the light in the dark, He's the truth, sets me free. It ain't my own power, it ain't my own might, it's His hand in mine through the shadows of night. In every high mountain, in every low valley I see, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. There's a peace like a river that flows in my soul when I give him the pieces and he makes me whole. It's the grace in the struggle, the hope in the pain, the song of the harvest in the middle of rain. I'm finding my rest in the shadow of his wings, in the quietest joy that his presence brings. Not by my strength, but by his holy name. Through the fire and flood, he remains the same. 'Cause I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He's the light in the dark, he's the truth, sets me free. It ain't my own power, it ain't my own might, it's his hand in mine through the shadows of night. In every high mountain, in every low valley I see, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He gives me strength.